もちろんファンの人からよ。あんたこんなことないわよね。
Hey guys, how you doing? Now, before you actually start googling what is stated in the title or the theme of this event, let me explain it first, because I feel like if you start trying to Google that immediately, you might actually get quite traumatized instead, depending on what you see and what type of person you are. So yeah, just hold back on the back burner and let me explain it all. Because yes, the event I went to this time is one called Enzan. This is the pamphlet for the event. As you can see, the pamphlet is really just a literal pamphlet. It's not like a full-on book like most other Doujin events I've gone to in the past. And this one was basically an event focused on Eroguro content. So for those of you who do not know what it is, and even for those of you who think you know because the terms may sound familiar and it's already bringing back some kind of trauma in your brain, it's kind of different. So let me explain it really quickly to the best that my limited understanding of it can also explain it. So the term Eroguro basically refers to a genre of content that focuses on both eroticism as well as grotesqueness. Though when it comes to the grotesqueness, it's not exactly what you might think of the term when it comes to English, because the term is more of what you'd consider waseego, which is like a word that is borrowed from English and basically used as is, or in this case in its short form, which is just guro instead, where it refers to not just things that are gory, although that is a component of what may be in some of these works, but basically anything in general that might be considered just horrific or unnatural in general. So even within Japan, the earliest depictions or considerations of what might be considered this are basically works of art that were created in the Muromachi as well as the Edo periods, where even things such as all of the weird stuff that they do with tentacles that people like to meme Japan for making in the first place, all of that would have actually been considered one of the earliest progenitors historically within Japan of said content, because all of that was considered to have a form of Edo as well as being extremely unnatural. Although nowadays it seems like the unnaturalness of it has become a little more of a norm within the people who like their sissy content, so it doesn't have that same level of consideration within the genre, but basically things like that. And you can actually find some elements of this in many of the bigger like mangas out there as well, even things such as within Berserk or some of Junji Ito's works as well. While they may not be focused on this, the idea of mixing the two in a way is something that many of the more dark mangas as well as animes out there do use to some extent, because the unnaturalness of it can feel very off-putting to especially casual audiences as well. But needless to say, because of the fact that, you know, the whole girl part of it, also for those who are very into like anime stuff, you might have been traumatized by it to some extent in terms of how much gore is used in the ero content sometimes. It is something that can be quite traumatic. So unless you're really into that or you really want to do some research into the genre itself, I don't recommend just going into Google and just like looking it up. Personally, for me, I'm quite squeamish actually when it comes to stuff like this, to be honest. Like, there's a part of me that just finds it like it just rubs my heart the wrong way in a sense, which I guess is something that people would want to like kink up in this thing sometimes. But you know, I'm someone who's perfectly fine with, like, especially because I play a lot of video games as well as a game person, like gore in media is not something that we are like not used to. We've seen shit like Mortal Kombat, for example, right? Even with things such as like the Fallout games, it might seem a little goofy and those when you shoot the guy with a missile and just goes like boop. But like stuff like that, we have seen a lot of it, and I'm fine with that being in media. When it comes to Aero content as well, I used to work in an aerogate company for a period of time, so suffice to say I'm quite fine with that as well. But when you take the two and you Apple pen them together, it just doesn't do it for me, I guess. Which is why I feel like when it's used in the context of something like horror or very dark action, like things like Guns or Berserk, where you're trying to show a world that's very raw and evil and fucked up, it works in those contexts to help portray that world and make the content more interesting in a way. And so in those contexts, it kind of works for me when you're using it in a way to further something else, like even with like Junji Ito's works on the body horror, the way the bodies warp and all that. It's disturbing, yes, but the main goal is to provide that horror, and in that kind of aspects, in those kind of entertainment fields, I feel like it works very well, especially, and I do enjoy seeing it in those contexts. But in terms of like in the whole like moe, anime, waifu sort of ways, which I know there's some people who do make doujins that are more in that direction, it really isn't something that I'm into. at all. Though even for people who are into it, I can respect that they are into it. I can see why it has a level of appeal, especially after going to this event, because I realized that the spread of what is considered within this subgenre itself can actually come to encompass a lot of the things that you wouldn't think would be considered part of this space initially when you first hear the name. So as I mentioned, I went to the event. The event had only 17 circles, really small. It was located in a very different part of Japan from most of the events I've gone to, probably because of the fact that it's small and the region itself was a bit more affordable. Plus the location was actually a lot more accessible for me than even the Sega event, so I'm kind of thankful that it was there. But basically what happened was someone actually told me about this event and that they were quite interested in it, and I decided that, since I do make videos where we go down to all of these different Doujin events and just like talk about what I see there, I've kind of wanted to go down, look at it, see what it's like, and maybe show you guys what some of the other events within Japan are also like, because that was part of the reason why I made the channel, to show that there's more to like Doujin content than what people think there is in it. So when I went to the event itself, needless to say, there were only 17 booths, but the booths themselves individually were all fairly big, probably because of the large space within the hall that they had to basically show off all of their content. So you had people just putting up all sorts of displays, a little more elaborate stuff and a bigger display of the type of goods they were selling. And to be honest, when I got there, like it was so different from my preconceived notion of what the event was gonna be. I was actually kind of surprised in the end, because you had people really selling things that were, to me at least, they just felt completely unrelated to the theme of the event itself. You had someone there selling like little vials of like some strange liquid, which sounds very, very suspicious when I put it that way. But what I'm trying to say is that they were selling basically like this weird white liquid that they were saying was like used by sailors back in the day as a way to like check for the weather. So like when it's raining, the liquid will like move up and down in the tube, so you know that like, oh, it's gonna rain today or something like that. And I was just looking at that and I was like, this looks really cool. I don't understand what this has to do with Eroguro at all. Like, it was actually that bizarre at points. I feel like I was stepping into something that was completely different from what I thought the subgenre was, because I guess maybe what I thought it was a lot more narrow than what the overall thing included. Because thinking about it, after the event ended, the idea of mixing the two, like just something unnatural or grotesque in general, not necessarily something violent and gory, and that with something that might have some level of error in it, is not exactly just like the thing that we all think it is. For example, there was actually a circle there that was actually selling some stuff that was actually more metal vibe-ish, I guess. Like, as someone who's into like death metal stuff, right, like that, like gore-ish things, I guess, like giant skeleton men doing like the dungos or whatever dance they do, like stuff like that, I'm actually kind of fine with. So, stuff like this as well, like this feels like completely fine with me. Like, just big badass looking skeleton monster thing with, man, or like this one, which is also like just big skeleton monster thing with woman. Like, when it comes to stuff like this, it just feels very metal. And when it comes to stuff like this, I'm actually quite fine with like what is there to some extent, because it just feels like I'm looking at like art from like maybe something like Berserk, or like some like super violent, hyper dramatic like machismo man fighting thing from like the 90s, if anything. So like it felt very different from what I was expecting from the event, to be honest. Some of the content there even was just like really just cutesy anime girl things with like the whole focus on the more men-hera side of things. So you have the cute and like sometimes sexy girls, anime cute girl thing going on for the Arrow segment, and you have the Guro in the sense of like what you would have probably something like Nidigo, for example, where you do have themes of like doing some things that might be kind of violent, especially those yandere or downer type things. So that also was a part of the event. Like, there was a lot of mixture of stuff like this instead. I feel like that may have actually taken up almost I would say 50% of the event was just a mixture of like death metal, men-hera stuff. There was even some circle there that was just selling like dramatic looking masks that feel like you would see them in like some horror or post-apocalyptic like movie or something. Like, this stuff like this in general that was there, that all actually looked kind of interesting to me at least, and didn't really focus as much on the gore aspect of stuff. So yeah, suffice to say, I won't say that I'm into Eroguro now, but at the very least, I now see that there is a lot more to this style of content. And I guess you could say that its influence on other forms of media can be really felt to some extent as well. Because really it also has circles doing stuff like this. Like, it really is just the case that it is all fairly different in a way from what I initially thought would be there, since I went through most of it. The most you could say is that there are depictions of blood in this at points, but it's never even alluded to whose blood it is or like who was harmed in the process, if any at all. You just have a person standing there with blood on them, and it's mostly just a fairly normal-ish, I guess it's a more depressive slice of life sort of thing, where it really is fairly normal-ish. And just more like Junie or maybe even like Manhattan in general. So needless to say, the things that we think it is, for those of us who think we know what it is in terms of like the gore and like the arrow in a way that feels like very traumatic in general, that does exist as a thing in the event as well. The whole shock value of that, as well as like the I don't know about you guys, but for me, when I see that kind of stuff, it gives me a bit of a visceral reaction as well, because like it's really something that for some reason, in spite of everything that I'm okay with, that just like makes my body feel weird in a not good way, you know. Like, so needless to say, that stuff is there as well. And there are circles that draw stuff like that rather than all of the other things that we've talked about till now, right? Like just stuff with like funny tentacles, death metal aesthetic stuff, like the Jirai cute downer side stuff, as well as just like vials of ancient weather forecasting items. Like there was another circle there as well. I didn't buy the thing in the end because I feel like it would terrify me in my sleep. Not because it was just basically like a more horror-esque thing where it was just like a frame with what looked like a zombie girl sticking out of it, and it just looked like the kind of thing that if I had to hang on my wall, I might have like Sadako crawling out of it in the middle of the night to try and kill me instead. So didn't really buy it, but like I can see the interesting and unique horror aesthetic of it, and it's like the kind of thing that I'm like, yeah, if you're into that kind of stuff, I get it. I can see people buying stuff like that as well. But yeah, overall the people there did feel quite friendly. It feels a lot like going to like a death metal live performance or something, where you expect, if you're not into the space, the people there to be all like weird, like maybe like violent ass people who look like they're just like complete like evil biker people or something. But the truth of the matter was the people there were fairly friendly and civil. Like this is like normal people like you and me. I don't think that's a surprise. I feel like, especially after being in like the whole like Doujin scene and going around all these different events, it really feels like that happens to be the case. Like more often than not, the artists that make things that people online look at as being like completely wild, they just tend to be very normal people who have a very unique sense of expression when it comes to like the fictional stuff that they create. And I did manage to go around talking to quite a few of them, and they were just very interesting people to talk to overall, like on like things like their inspirations that got them into all of this type of art styles, as well as like producing content at this type of events. I think the strange thing that happened this time around, which I don't think has ever really happened before, is that like two of the circles actually asked me if like I have been to these events before, which this was my first time being at one, and they were like, I feel like I've seen you before, and one of the circles was even like, you look like my friend's boyfriend, and I was like, treat me like white tees, don't get me dirty. I hope that's a compliment. Like in the most awkward way, like one could say it. It was so bizarre. I don't know if that's supposed to be like some secret code or something, and like if you say like something like very specific, they're gonna open a door into the netherworld or something, and you can go and like party in like wherever they do their like secret like cult party or something. I don't think that actually exists, but it was kind of funny to like see that happen with like two completely different circles of people from completely different prefectures who apparently had gathered here just for this event. But yeah, aside from that, I guess one other thing that I found to be kind of interesting in the way they did the crowd control for the event was that usually with many of the Doujin events right out there, they either use the wristband to track that you have entered before and that you can enter again, or for the smaller events, usually they use the catalog itself. So you would bring like the book catalog that the event has, kind of like how something like Comitia, for example, has something like this. You know, they have the entire full catalog of all the circles participating and everything, and you basically use this to enter instead. With this event, they catalog as like a literal piece of paper, and I guess maybe they were afraid that because it's a single slip, that people might actually lose it, or that it might be a lot easier to replicate as well, to basically cheat your way into the event, since, you know, with a book, it takes a lot more effort to print and bind it together to use as a check. But when it's like this, I guess you could photocopy it, and it makes it a lot more effort on their part to check to ensure that it's the correct thing. So instead instead of that, when you got to the event itself, they actually gave you a pin badge of the exact same design on the poster itself, and you would basically use this pin badge as your re-entry ticket in that sense, which was kind of cool, I guess. I feel like it's less cost effective than using a book, but then again, I'm not sure how much it costs to produce something like this. It does seem to be quite small, so I guess maybe this might have been an easier way to do it, or because of the fact that they didn't have that much content that they wanted to put onto the catalog, and then this ended up working better instead. But yeah, suffice to say, overall, there's a lot of content within the event that I cannot show on this video as well, because the level of gore that is in some of the things, I feel like would probably like violate YouTube's guidelines in a way, because like it goes into things like, you know, what you would see like maybe Elfen Lied, or even in something like Guns, for example, where it feels like it goes very into that gore side of things as well, which obviously with the restrictions on like just violent content in general, which, you know, to be fair, understandable. So those parts of it I'll leave out. For those of you who are into the whole Eroguro thing and who know what it is for what it is, like more so than me, I feel like I really didn't know much about it prior to this event. Like I only had like that very specific impression of what it was. For those people, the stuff you're looking for in general, I feel like you'll probably find at this event still. Although there were only 17 circles, so it's quite limited what you would be able to find. Like last I checked, the next run of this event, which I think they run it twice a year in the same location, probably the same number of circles, and the entry fee itself is fairly expensive as well. Is one thing I probably should mention. It costs 1,500 yen to enter, which may not sound like a lot, but compared to most Doujin events I have ever been to before, this might actually be the one with the highest entry fee that isn't Comiket. Most of these smaller scale events that I have went to in the past, basically things like Puniket and the like, right, which still reach about 400 circles, those still cost around maybe 1,200, and if you pre-order the tickets in advance, it's 1,000 yen at points. Comitia is around the same price as this, but Comitia is, if you pre-order beforehand, it's 1,300, on site it's 1,500, and you're going into an event which is so big and prominent that even manga publication companies are going there to scout talent and review the works of the artists who want it, and to give them feedback on it as well. So we are talking about an event that is much bigger in scale, taking up maybe 3 halls in Comiket in comparison. The smallest event I've been to, which is like I think 15 circles, so this 2 smaller than this one, was the uniform specific one, where it's just about people who are really into all forms of uniforms, be it like you think that the fireman in his fire suit looks really cool and you wanna bang his suit or something, I don't know, or you're just someone who really likes to look into the history of all the different school uniforms that exist in Japan over the years. Even that event, if I'm not mistaken, was about 1,000 yen, so 1,500 is really close to the higher end, and the only event that really beats this in price is probably Comiket, and that's only if you're going for the really higher end tickets of Comiket that it actually goes higher than this. So suffice to say, it's not cheap, not too expensive, especially if you're someone who's really into the stuff and really wants to come in and see it. Although, like most of the other small scale events that I've talked about in this videos, it's really one of those things where if you happen to be in Japan touring at the time, or you plan to tour Japan generically with no other big event goals in mind, then maybe you could try to get it to cross the streams with when this event is up, and come over and look at what the event has to offer while you're already here in that sense. But yeah, overall I would say this is an event that was quite different from what I've usually gone to in the past. I won't say it's for me, like a lot of the mixture of the two still does feel weird to me, so I'm not a fan of it. But if you're interested in it, I feel like this is a very interesting event to be able to get to meet more of the people who are into this kind of stuff as well, or to creators who make this type of content. So I would say that if this is your thing, you can feel free to go for it. It feels like the kind of event that personally for me, while it does have some overlap with the types of things I like, even then it's just like 1 or 2 circles, so I may like follow those, like the one that does the very death metal-y aesthetic thing, and the Jiraiya is like ish stuff, but it'll probably be like the kind of thing that I'll just be like, yeah, I'll probably follow those 1 or 2, since the event is not that massive, and it's more like some of the content itself does, like in all honesty, make me feel a bit squeamish. So it's a fine balance to be taken, I guess. Overall, I would say though, it did give me a much better understanding of the subculture that is the whole Eroguro scene as well. So to me, I feel like it was a very interesting learning experience, to be honest, because I did get to learn more, both in terms of the research I started doing because of the person who asked me to go to the event, as well as after speaking to all of the creators, as well as the people who were at the event, to basically get a better grasp of what the space is about and how diverse the content for it is, and how much it influences other spaces as well through the different ways that the term Guro is actually being used within Japan instead. But that said, that's all from me for today. Thank you all for watching. I don't know how this video was gonna do at all. But yeah, this is an event that was something that I never even really knew existed prior to, like, I would say maybe like March, when I was told about this event. And even then, it was one that with this video, I was very antsy about how best to go about producing it, if at all. So I hope for those of you who found this interesting, that it was something interesting to you guys, and to people who accidentally googled it after seeing the title and like got traumatized, I sincerely apologize. But that said, that's all from me for today. So until next time, take care and bye bye.